Welcome everyone to this special Lean Into Allyship event. And it's really going to be focused on defending Black girlhood as part of Women's History Month. And so we really are excited for the event tonight. And we're thrilled to have you here with us this evening. And what we like to do to kick off every event is just understand kind of who's in the audience. Since we can't see you, let us know in the Q&A how many times you've attended a Lean Into Allyship event and where you're joining us from. And that just helps us understand, again, the familiarity with the type of content that we cover, as well as, again, where you're at across the United States, or if it's even beyond that. So again, please enter that into the Q&A. Tonight, we have again turned off the chat, but that's going to be for Nehemiah to be entering a lot of resources throughout the event. And so it's very intentional for that to be kind of a one area for all of that information to be shared with you. And I'm going to kind of watch the responses coming in. So we have quite a few from Madison. And it looks like there's a few that are first time again. Actually, first or second time seems to be.
That's great.
And we have some that are 3 or 4, but there are, again, probably an equal amount that are first time. So that is what always amazes us with these events, is we never know if it's, people who have attended one of the first 7 or 8, or if it is your first. And so welcome if it's your first. You're in for a treat tonight. And so for those of you who have returned, again, you've heard us say, but we strongly recommend that you donate to Nehemiah, because again, as we go through this event, we cannot and do not expect Nehemiah, as well as Defending Black Girlhood in this case, to educate us for free. And we'll be talking and dropping the links for where you can donate throughout the event, but just encourage you to look at seeing if your company has a donation match, right? Seeing how you can maximize the value of that dollar to go a little bit further to help these Black-led organizations. And so again, if you've joined these events in the past, or if it's your first time, there's going to be a lot of information shared tonight. We're really excited, but we're going to ask that you just sit back, soak in the information, and be present. All of the information that will come through the chat tonight will be sent afterwards. We will record the event, and you will get a link to all of the previous events. So those are some of the typical questions we get. So just rest assured, you will get that in a follow-up email. And then tonight, like I said, we have a lot to cover. So the agenda is going to be about 10 minutes talking with Dr. G about some current events and exciting new podcasts that we're going to let him talk through. And then about 40 to 45 minutes, we'll be talking with Laleda G about, again, defending Black girlhood. And then we'll wrap up at the end talking about, as allies, how we can educate, donate, and affiliate, specific with what Laleda has talked about all evening. And then we'll end with an ally in action challenge. And so with that, let's get started. And so again, for those who don't know, Dr. G is the president, the founder, and the visionary for the nonprofit Nehemiah. And so the vision of that organization is engaging the greater Madison community to empower African-American individuals, families, and communities to bring about hope, transformation, and justice. And so Nehemiah's work really focuses on 5 key areas, and that's education, economic development, incarceration, family and community wellness, and leadership and capacity development. So they have a lot going on within this organization. And Dr. G has been in this space for 35 plus years, being an advisor to leaders across the world. And one of the things that he's really been focused on lately too, as well as throughout that time, is educating, coaching, and mobilizing white or non-Black would-be allies. And so welcome, Dr. G. We're excited to have you back. And so we're really excited about season 5 of Black Like Me and the podcast that you have coming out. Can you just share with the audience, what we should expect this season and what you're most excited for?
Sure. Dan, it's really good to be here tonight. It's good to see you and Samantha and others who helped us to come to pass. Lauren and our friends from Generator. It's really great to be here. Season 5 of Black Like Me is talking about, the theme is now what? Because there is a temptation to become very comfortable and to think that things are just all better because there's a newly elected president. We don't have someone, tweeting craziness all the time. But this is the time we have to be really, really vigilant. And we see this even with the recent, and not so recent, but the recently visible attacks against Asians and Asian Americans. That is just letting us know that our work of trying to stop anti-Blackness, trying to stop racism is nowhere near being finished. And so it's important for us to have people to come into something like Lean Into Allyship and to understand what's going on, what the issues are, and how they partner with us to make things happen. Our work is to really strengthen and help African Americans, Blacks, to navigate these treacherous waters, but to also build bridges to our non-Black allies to understand how they work together for solutions. And so, Dan, this might be a good place just to queue up the video. Is it all right if we do that? And then it's only about 2.5 minutes. We can come back out of it, but this is just meant to be a reminder. We'll send a link to you so that people can watch it and think about it and process it. But it's really just reminding people this is not the time to sleep. This is the time to lean in. Now what? Trump's been outvoted, denied, demoted. Republicans, they cried foul and the Dems just gloated. Biden wins, world news spins, and Senate gives a free pass to insurrectionist sins. The Vice President Harris stuns, scared whites still tote guns, and uncertainty about life is everyone. These fools ain't done. Now what? They say Black Lives Matter, still black blood splatters. Black hope scatters and America's soul tatters. White folks are now sadder. We'll do much better is the chatter. Corporations are now promising us upward ladders, but the lack of follow through is making black folks madder. Meanwhile, the good old Proud Boys are getting gladder. And vaccinations that are causing black consternations, while pharmaceutical companies, they're the ones getting fatter. And now what? Our capital suffered insurrection by those who doubt an official election. On January 6th, they showed true disaffection. They would have never lived if they had my complexion. Well, civility needs a resurrection, and those guilty thugs a house of correction. I just pray for a national day of genuflection. And what doesn't kill us by guns, kills us dead by infection. Now what? Ally, what good is it to see and to have not spoken, to have dreamed but yet remain unwoken? I'm a man, not a token. Don't fix me. I ain't what's broken. Truth's in your face. We ain't been joking. Now you know the violence that America's been cloaking. Huge needs of injustice on our future, they be choking. Non-blacks, there's no time for just sitting and soaking. All them embers of justice that black folks have been stoking, you're trapped as well if you're not provoking. It's time for whites to truly be woken. Now what? Now what? You know, every time I see that, Daniel and Samantha, I lean in. There are times I forget that I wrote that. It was just kind of burning, in my heart. What I really appreciate about the work of Lean Into Allyship, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here and you all are here. I say this in your absence as well. You figured out what to do. You know, people know the story, Daniel. You called me up, almost a year ago and said, if I could get together 50 people, would you meet with us and talk with us? But you figured that out. You and Samantha figured that out. Lauren and the folks at Generator said, we'll help you. We'll provide a platform. As we're doing the work of engaging in the work of information and inspiration, there are still people who are waking up, but they're waking up thinking that it is our responsibilities to place them. You know, when I was in college, I had a placement office. They didn't guarantee me a job. They just gave me a place to find out who was coming to campus and how to prepare for that particular interview, but it was not their job to negotiate my contract with that particular employer should I be hired. So I think as people are waking up, they're stuck between two things. Either they don't fully wake up and they think it's better now, or they wake up thinking someone's going to tell me where to find the Black and the brown people. Someone's going to tell me where to find the Asian American people. Someone's going to help me have those conversations. Someone's going to send them to me. And so I appreciate the fact that you are educating and helping to inspire people here on Lean Into Allyship. But the deep expectation is that people will educate themselves so that they can educate, donate, and affiliate, but find ways to use our information to ready themselves so that when the opportunity presents itself to work or to talk or to lean in across cultural lines, they'll be better prepared to do so. So I'm just seeing so much that's happening, Daniel, particularly what's happening with Asian and Asian Americans. I'm sorry that we were pitted against each other, that they were told that they were model minorities, so that they thought that these things weren't real. And so the thought was when Black people cried foul, we were just being lazy or belligerent. And so we're now having deep talks about the importance of our communities to talk and to work together. So I'm in meaningful conversations with Asian Americans from coast to coast. And we're talking about how now it's time for us to stand up against acts of white supremacy.
And you answered the second question, Dr. G. So, I mean, that was what I was going to ask you since you had mentioned the Asian American. And for those who have heard of AAPI, if you've heard about that in the news, that's Asian American and Pacific Islander, specifically, referring to some of the recent things that have occurred in Georgia, but also, the 3,800 plus crimes that have been recorded throughout COVID as well. And so that was one of the questions we wanted him to speak to about how the Black community and you, Dr. G, respond when it occurs to another race or ethnicity. So thank you for touching on that, because I think a lot of viewers are wondering about that and how we come together in solidarity for all of those different communities.
And it's important to understand too, Daniel, that there's work needs to be done in that area. It's not automatic, because solidarity was broken so many years ago because of the fear that we would work together. Most people don't realize this, because people who look like me are still called minorities. Folks who look like you, Dan, or for you, like you, Samantha, only make up about 8% of the world's population. But yet, the 8%, but yet words like minority, as if we're minor, we're the smallest, we're the fewest, we're the weakest. And so we've been separated for fear that we will collaborate in order to demand rights and justice, not to take over America, to just enjoy the America that's been promised and delivered to so many people who don't look like us. So we have work to do, because we have been told that we are enemies of each other. And we are now overcoming that. We are gaining ground, and we're beginning to talk and work together. But even the fact that we are separated is part of the work that we are undoing here in this country, because we've been pitted against each other for the sake of economic stability for white Americans.
And I think that's just that complexity of the white supremacy, of how that's been built into the system, right? It's very intentional, but is not understood. So thank you for talking about that, because again, I think that might be a first time some of the listeners are hearing of that. Yeah. And so I think just for the sake of time, I do want to transition now to talk with Reverend Loleta G. So she is the definitely the focus tonight with defending Black girlhood, but you may have already seen her with the Black History for a New Day last night. Could have also been with her sermon that she had given on Sunday. She's had a busy week, and we're really, really happy to have her here with us tonight. And there's a little bit of a bio that I want everyone to be aware of so that you can really understand who she is. And so she's really a dynamic woman. I mean, she's an incredible artist and muralist, and we're going to talk about that tonight. She's a life-changing healer, a daring preacher, like I just talked about, and a published author, international inspirational speaker, and podcast host. So just a couple things that she has going on in her free time. But she's also the president and founder of Defending Black Girlhood and the Latest Art. And that nonprofit specializes in advocating for Black girls being safe in their homes, schools, and communities to live, learn, and be loved. And you're going to hear a lot about that tonight. And she's actually committed her life to the defending of Black girlhood and the healing of Black women. And one thing that I really want to stress is she is one of the most seasoned service providers to Black women in the Madison community, to the point that she's now helping the daughters of the women that she helps. So second generation at this point, which is really incredible that she's been able to see that. And we'll talk about the generational trauma throughout. She has more than 30 years in the field of education and social services, and founded the Black Women Heal, which is a Madison-based nonprofit, again, and asking those to join her in defending the Black girlhood. This was from my own research. She did not share this, but she was in the 2021 Dr. Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award winner among two other individuals. Is that correct, Loleta?
That's correct.
Yep. So too humble to admit it, but I wanted to make sure I did my research before the event.
Thank you.
And if that wasn't enough, your work has expanded beyond the United States, right? And it's gone to Africa, South America, Central America. So I say all of this to say for all of the attendees tonight, you are in for a treat, because you've also started the international healing movement of Black Women Heal Day. And so with that, I want to jump into the first question specific around your podcast. And for those who did see the invite that was sent out by Nehemiah, we did ask you to listen to the episode called Ground Zero on her podcast, Defending Black Girlhood. So for those who didn't, that's okay. But I want to just start out with a general question, Leleda, and just say, why do Black girlhoods need to be defended, to the point of creating a podcast about it and dedicating your life work to that?
That is a fantastic question. And I think it almost surprises people when I say defending Black girlhood, like from what, why? And, which is all the more reason why it needs to be done. When we look at and begin to understand the impact of historical sexual trauma, in particular for Black women, for myself, I go back generations of Black women who were sexually assaulted, systematically for economic reasons, for people's own sexual pleasure throughout slavery since my first ancestor left the shores of Africa. And my daughter is the first direct from my lineage who has not been sexually abused. And so what we learn is when we're looking at generational trauma, it's something that is passed forward. And when we look even down to the DNA level, we understand that the same DNA that they use when you're doing Ancestry.com, that mitochondrial DNA, that physically lived in my mother's body, my grandmother's body, my great-great-grandmother's body. And so something that lives inside of me and lived inside of me even when I was a girl, physically witnessed all of that sexual trauma. And so then we come forward as little girls, and all of this is part of our background. All of this is part of our story, yet we don't even know it. We don't understand it. But when we look at what's going on with Black girls today, Black girls are being kicked out of school. Black girls are being caught up in more violence. There is an estimate of 65 to 75,000 Black women and girls who are reported missing. And I underscore reported because there are so many that go missing. There's no report. There's no Amber Alert. There's no call to the police. There's nothing. And as we begin to look, 40, 50 years ago, Malcolm X said that the Black woman was the most disrespected person in America. And I underscore that with exclamation point, but I go on to say that if you think Black women are disrespected, what regard do you think there is for Black girls?
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Leleda, for sharing all of that. I haven't had a chance yet to say it, so I just want to start off by, again, thanking you so much for being here. Your work is incredible. You are so inspiring. I am fangirling a bit just being here alongside you tonight.
Thank you.
I'm just so very humbled and grateful for you taking time to join us tonight. But
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So to carry on with the accolades and praise, you are truly an incredible artist, and we would love to show our attendees one of your inspirational pieces of art right now. You all will see that on the screen. You can find that in downtown Madison. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit in just a sec, but could you start us off with just sharing with us why you create the art that you do and how this ties into Black girlhood?
Absolutely. When we look at most of the racially charged things that are going on in America right now and that have been going on in America, at the foundation, a lot of that is just fear. And what I have found is that in creating the art that I do, with showing the girlhood of Black girls, many studies have shown that girls as young as 4 and 5 are adultified, which means people look at them older than they are. And because they look at them that way, their expectation is skewed. And so then their punishment is as well. We're having Black girls 9 times more in this state of Wisconsin than any other state being suspended from school. And we're having them being suspended from school even as young as 4 and 5 from preschool. And so with the art that I do, it causes people to lean in a little closer and to look and to see the innocence of Black girlhood. And my hope is that if you can see that in these images that you're not afraid of, that the next time you actually see a Black girl, she's in your classroom, she's on your caseload as a social worker, she's walking down the street and needs some help or protection, that you'll lean into her.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Like I said, we have highlighted on the screen one of your pieces of art that can be found downtown Madison that was painted following the murder of George Floyd last summer. I personally can tell you, in having the opportunity to look at this art down on State Street, yours was always one that really stuck out, and that message and everything that you have just shared really is, I think, the draw and just the beauty and the intention that comes through in your art. So wanted to make sure that everyone could see that. Yes, thank you. We talked before the event, and some of the conversation you had shared was mentioning that you are not a fan of the term Black girl magic. And I would love if you could elaborate a bit on why you feel that way.
Absolutely. And this piece here is really a point on that. And I also just want to throw out that it's important to remember that Breonna Taylor was horrifically, brutally killed in her home, and that these art pieces were in response to that as well. I think when we say that Black girls are magic, it gives everyone the opportunity kind of to dismiss what their needs are. Because if you're magic, you can conjure up whatever you need. If you're magic, you don't need any help. If you're magic, we're not concerned about you being missing. If you're magic, we're not concerned about the fact that you're fatherless. If you're magic, we're not concerned about the fact that you're not safe in school, in your home, or your community. It's dismissive. And I don't think it was created with that in mind or that intention, but it's dismissive in the end because we think, okay, girls are good. When we look at single parent households, we think, okay, well, the girl has her mom. She's good. And I think we miss the opportunity to understand how much Black girls are in need. And what they need in order to thrive. And even the conversation about Black girlhood, and this is one thing that I will continue to talk about, is that if I wanted to Google Black girls and anything about Black girls, hiking, biking, camping, or whatever, I will not find anything about Black girls. It'll be about Black women. I will either find porn or I will find something about Black women. Black women do this, but it's Black girls do this, Black girls do that. And so if we're always calling Black women girls, when do we ever have a conversation about Black girls and what they need and what they're doing?
That is such powerful perspective. Thank you so much. Dan, are you able to join us back? There he is.
Yep. And the next question that I had speaks to intersectionality. And so for those who are potentially, again, attending for the first time or not sure what that word refers to, it's really, very basically the overlapping identities that come together. And so throughout the series, we've heard from Dr. G about what it's like to be a Black man in the Madison community. But would love to hear from you in a little bit more depth about what it's like to not only be Black, but be a Black woman and the challenges that causes. And so can you just elaborate on the experiences that you've had and how both of those identities, among whatever else that you want to share, how that plays out for you on a daily basis?
Well, the first thing came to mind was a cuss word, but I won't say that.
It's an adult show. You can say what you want.
It's fucked up. It's fucked up to be a Black woman in Madison in particular. Madison loves Black male leadership. And there will be so many crucial conversations, decision makings, funding that will be had where Black men will be invited to the table, but Black women are not. even to the point of us even being able to be empowered to work with our own girls. And what I have found, and I don't think it's unique to, I know it's not unique to Madison, but what I've found is this, is that many times when we're talking about racism, we'll talk about, patriarchy and what the white man has done and all this kind of thing. The white man has done a lot of shit, okay? So we can't get away from that. But what we often fail to do is talk about the responsibility and the cooperation of the white woman. So when we look at all the things that white men have controlled, what we fail to look closer at are the things that white women control: social services, education. And if we just live between those two things, it's really, for my estimation, it's really a extension of the plantation, of the white women's control, particularly over the Black children on the plantation, over the Black women, over the Black women's body. Black women couldn't even nurse their own children because they were nursing white babies. And when you look at, the lack of education and the ability to be taught and educated, what's going on right now? We look historically, and everything is 2020 when you're looking backwards. When we look historically at the desegregation of schools, that's when the shit hit the fan for Black students. When Black children were in Black schools, they might have lacked resources. They may have lacked good books and good heat and all that kind of stuff. But what they did not lack is love. What they did not lack was expectation. And so when Black teachers were teaching Black children, they loved them. They were role models for them, and they had high expectations for them. With the desegregation of schools, Black children were forced to go to white schools where they had to go under armed guard. If I had to go to work and the only way I could go to work was that I had to have armed guards take me there because my life was threatened, I wouldn't go to work. So we were forced to send our children to school under these conditions. And what we found was that our children are now in schools where their lives are being threatened. They're being spat upon. No one wants to teach them. They're in places, they're bused from their communities to places they don't know, cities they don't know, communities they don't know. And we begin to see a decline of children's experiences, Black children's experience in the schools. When we look at social services, predominantly, there are white women who control social services. They are the social workers. They're the supervisors of the social workers. They run 99.99% of organizations that are giving out social services. And so we look at the droves and droves of Black children who are being taken away from their parents, placed in white homes, placed outside their homes. Does anybody understand that this sounds just like slavery? When Black babies were snatched from the arms from their Black mothers, the same thing is happening right now in Dane County. You look at the high numbers of Black children that are being removed from their homes. And so it's fucked up to be a Black woman in Madison, because if you look at the statistics, when they talk about Black homelessness, when they talk about Black poverty, when you talk about the Black family, you're talking about Black women and their children, because there's a huge number of Black homes that are headed by females. So when you're talking about the high numbers of homelessness in Dane County, that's Black women and her children who are homeless. When you're talking about underemployment of Black families, all of those things, you're really talking about Black women and what our experience is in this community. And what you have is droves and droves of white women who are in these powerful positions to make decisions over Black women, their bodies, and their children. And they don't even know us. I've done trainings and trainings with white women who are social workers who are making decisions about Black women, and they don't know one personally. I asked a group of white social workers whose caseload was about 90% of Black women. I said, do you know any Black women personally? No. So then how do you know what a healthy baseline is for a Black woman? How do you know how to help and support and empower Black women if you personally don't know one? And I'm gonna tell you, in 2020, well, it's 2021, you have to be very intentional not to know somebody Black. And this is impacting the decisions that are being made about our children and our lives and our bodies. And it's hell. And the statistics show it.
And one of the questions, so just as a reminder to the audience, we want you to drive the second half of this discussion. So please enter in any question that you have from listening to Laleda's podcast, from what she's saying right now, or anything that you've been wondering that you can get immediate feedback on and in response to that question. We did have one come in specifically about how can a white ally, such as a teacher, support Black girls in class? And this was specifically related to a white male teacher and a very small town outside of Madison, Oregon, where there's a Black small population in the school, where they express a lot of frustration over discrimination and microaggressions. And so how can a white male teacher, it's a loaded question, Laleda, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can a white male in that situation, really help to be an ally and support Black girls in class?
I think it really starts with being courageous enough to hold your colleagues accountable for what they say, what they don't say, what they do, what they don't do. So much of defending Black girlhood has nothing to do with directly dealing with a Black girl. It's about dealing with those who deal with Black girls and having an accountability for their behavior. So that's one thing, because we see a lot, but do we say a lot? Do we do a lot? The other thing is really looking at curriculum. I've done trainings with educators on how do you bring forth curriculum that is inclusive, from the sublime to the ridiculous, to the reading list, to the story math problems. Do you ever have anybody named LaQuisha in your storybook problems? You know what I'm saying? So it's about beginning to usher in that experience, because what ends up happening is that if white parents and white educators don't help students to understand that this is a very multicultural world, that even if you're living in a city like Oregon, understanding that unless you plan on staying in Oregon, your world is not going to be that white. So that we do white children a disservice as parents, as educators, if we do not teach them how to well integrate with people who don't look like them. And so those are just some of the things, but then also you look around, what do you see on the walls? Is there anything that looks like her? When she says something is an issue, do you speak to that? I can't tell you how many times I've heard young Black students talk about complaining when a student has used the N-word, and educators and administrators do nothing about it. So listening, looking, and speaking up.
And Samantha, I'll turn over to you to see just really quick in the Q&A if there's, we're getting some questions come in, which is excellent. So I want to know if there's a question that you want to queue up.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I'm working through them now. Okay, so we have a question in from, I'm so sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly, but Larice. She says, I heard recently that the statement of Black fathers being largely absent is a myth. And now Laleda said that homeless Black families means Black women and their children. If both are true, this seems a contradiction. Could you speak a little bit to that, Laleda?
Where are you getting those facts, I guess I would ask? The absenteeism of Black men from families is a fact. And as we look across the board at many families, Black, white, and otherwise, with the rise in divorce, a lot of fathers of all races, of all economic levels, are absent from active engagement in their children's lives.
Thank you for that. We had another one come in that I think is really interesting, going back to your art.
Wait, Samantha, can we go back just for a second?
Yes.
I think it's important just to take a pause about that, because, what I would ask for anyone who hears something that I say is to lean in further, is to do their own research and understand about it. Whether or not one person says Black fathers are there and another person says that homeless Black families are headed by Black women in this community, do the work on that. Lean in and find out. But I feel like sometimes we deflect because we don't really want to lean into what's true or the pain of the truth or the darkness of the truth. So I can't make racism pretty for you. I can't take away the stank of it. So yeah, I just needed to say that.
Yeah, thank you for that follow-up. I think that is a perfect reminder, right? That we are here in these conversations to become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is the work, that is the responsibility. That's the work that we are here to do, through Lean Into Allyship, and that everyone that's joining us here, we're all at different places and at different, at different points in our journey and on this path, but it is our responsibility to take that reflection and to be okay with being questioned, and to be okay with that. That is the point. I think also I can say that for both Dan and I, with our events, we both go back and watch them after the fact, because there's a lot going on, when we are hosting and monitoring the chat and, trying to engage and be present and everything all at the same time. We always go back after the fact and watch it again to actually take in the content and have our own moments of, reflection and just and honesty, in the work that we're doing, because I think in these moments, we don't necessarily have, the time or opportunity to do that. But I appreciate that. I appreciate that moment to stop and back up, and readdress, push us further. And that's part of, our responsibility and our intention. So thank you so much for that. I had one other question that I saw come in that I thought was very interesting, and I am excited to hear your answer. They asked about your art, and is there something you are meaning to convey by not by having no eyes on the faces of signs?
That is one of the most frequent questions that I am asked. And yes, indeed. For one thing, I think if I gave you all the pieces, you say, oh, you just walk past it. But something about not having all the facial features really makes people stop and look. I don't know if they think they're going to find the eyes somewhere on the ground. I don't know, but it makes them stop and look. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to stop and I want you to look and I want you to think about what you're looking at and have some feeling, some movement by it. The other thing of it, the backside is I want any Black girl to be able to see herself in that face, in that situation, of that happiness, of that joy. I want any Black girl to see so she can kind of see herself in that blank space.
I love that. That is so powerful.
Thank you.
On my neighborhood walk, we had a bunch of your signs up in our neighborhood,
That's awesome.
Especially your signs over the election. And my daughter would always comment about Biden and Harris, and your art is incredible, but it was always a highlight of our walk. And
that's so sweet.
Notable reference too. And thank you for that response.
Thank you.
Dan, did you want me to grab another one? Are you back?
I am back. Yes. So again, keep the questions coming in. So something that is unique to this Lean Into Allyship that I forgot to mention too, is that Leleda already agreed to answer any question that comes in that we don't get to in this event. So again, our challenge to you is to come up with that many questions that we can't get to them. And then later we will have a follow-up. But
that's great.
One of the questions came in, I think going back to when you were talking about white women. And the question is, what's the impact of white women leadership in the sexual assault and domestic violence on Black girls and Black women? And based on how you just responded there, go into as much depth as you want, because this is a pretty heavy topic.
This is why I don't play poker. I talked about that in my sermon, because I cannot control this face. It is devastating. It's devastating. My book, I Can't Live Like This Anymore, talking about my own journey of healing from childhood sexual abuse. When it came out in 2006, I started getting on the track of speaking and doing trainings with the statewide Coalition on Sexual Abuse and Domestic Violence. So I've done extensive work in the state of Wisconsin. And as I was doing my work, I've always worked cross-culturally. Having grown up in Madison, I am comfortable in a room full of Black people. I'm comfortable in a room full of white people and everything in between. So I've been doing my work cross-culturally. And man, as I started doing the work, I saw that at no time in the years that I was doing statewide work were there more than 2 Black sexual assault advocates in the entire state. Now, one would think, well, maybe because that's Wisconsin. No, conversely, there were Latino or Spanish-speaking advocates. They were Native American advocates. They were Hmong advocates. They were LGBTQ advocates. But no one thought to say, wait a minute, stop. What's going on that we don't have Black women? I'm talking about Milwaukee, Beloit, Racine, Madison, where you have predominant communities that are Black. The entire state, there were no more than 2 at one time, usually 1, sometimes none. When you look at the sexual assault nurses that do the examinations after someone comes and report, I don't think at any point in time had there been more than 1 Black sane nurse at once. And times for years and chunks of time, there were absolutely none. So you go back to, just like I was discussing about the social workers who've never known a Black person. So now you have these same nurses, you have the sexual assault advocates, you have the police officers who are taking reports. They don't know a Black woman. They don't understand how Black women act and respond. So immediately we're too loud. Immediately we need to calm down. Immediately, if we raise our voice, if we're crying, we're a threat. So then they get to fall into their fear, and then their fear prevents them from doing the service that they're supposed to be doing. And so it's devastating. So what usually happens is, if we were to dare, numbers out there say that out of every 15 assaults, 1 Black woman reports it. And I think that's even low. So what ends up happening, now somebody gonna fact check that statistic for me too. So what ends up happening is that we don't report. And if we do, we go to a rape crisis place and we 45, 50, 60-year-old Black woman are met with a 22-year-old white woman who doesn't know a Black person, never met a Black person in her life. And that's supposed to help us heal and deal with this horrific trauma that we're dealing with. And no training on how to deal with Black people. And if there is any competency training, which I do not believe in cultural competency, it's a myth. Most cultural competency that I've ever known about has been white people training white people. I want to know, how does a white person train a white person to understand me? And you don't even know me. So what happens is we don't report. We don't go for therapy. And so we don't heal. So then our trauma, we eat it. We eat it, we swallow it, we hold on to it, and it makes us sick. Black women lead stress-related diseases, heart disease, diabetes, all of these stress-related diseases into later life, Alzheimer's. Black women are the leading victims of Alzheimer's. And so all of this ties in together because we don't have any place to go to relieve our stress, to relieve our pain, to relieve our trauma. And it's a disservice when you look at the historical implications of sexual trauma on Black women, so that even if I'm not dealing with my own sexual trauma, I already got my mama's sexual trauma in my body. And so we don't heal. And so everything that comes behind not healing from trauma impacts us, and it shows in every negative statistic you can find.
Thank you for that powerful response, because I think a lot of corporations is in the move to diversity and inclusion, especially, are always talking about cultural competence or things like that. But I think it's your perspective is especially enlightening to put it in context of who's doing the training and where that information is coming from. That is the first time I've heard that perspective, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, because that is twists some things for me as well. And you've mentioned quite a few times throughout this, and I want you to go a little bit deeper in this as well about healing. And so in your Ground Zero episode, what I found really enlightening as well about how do women need to heal and the cost if they don't, as it relates to future generations. And then, because you've mentioned the generational trauma a few times as well. But how does a Black girl and then woman heal? And if they don't, what's the impact? And how does that relate to forgiving and forgetting as well?
Okay, so first of all, fuck forgiving and forgetting. Okay, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that because that puts the pressure really quickly on someone who's been victimized. Get over it. That's not exactly what you're saying, but that's kind of what people are saying. You're not going to forget it. Now, can you move forward? I like to say, let go, let it go, because that puts you in a power position. Because when I'm letting go of something that's bothering me, I don't even have to think about you. I need to think about how's this impacting me, and I need to let it go so I can move forward. And I think sometimes we expect ourselves, we expect Black people to move into forgiveness way too quickly over a lot of trauma that's happening. When that crazy boy went in that church and shot up those Black people, the next day, the daughter of like a 90-year-old man who was shot and killed was like, I forgive him. How could you forgive something? It hasn't been 24 hours. We need to hurt, and that's part of healing. We need to be able to hurt. What was done to me hurts. I feel it. I'm in pain. And so, there was a girl who had an incident that happened in school. This boy hit on her behind. I talked about that in my presentation on Monday. And the mom was called up and said, hey, she revealed that she had been sexually abused. Did you know this? And the mom said, yeah, but I haven't been able to deal with mine. I can't help her deal with hers. So what happens to a girl who's gone through that type of pain and experience, and her own mother can't help her deal with it because her own mother is stuck in her own pain? That's the implication of it. Because now that girl learns, like her mother before her, stuff your pain because who cares? Now, understanding the implication of that, during slavery, when a Black girl was raped, who could she turn to? Who could she say, hey, they just raped me? Who could respond on her behalf? After a while, it's just kind of like the fish that is mutated in a cave with no light. After a while, it can't see anymore. After a while, it loses its color. After a while, you lose your voice as a Black woman because no one's listening to your pain. So you stop saying it and you turn it inside. And then you get obese, or you go on drugs, or you're in broken relationships, or you're shopping too much. You're doing something because you don't know how to heal. You don't know what to heal. So you're doing anything to feel better. And that's the implication, is that actions continue to happen, but none of those actions are restorative. And so we just keep passing the pain forward and forward and forward.
And I know you had shared that in your podcast as well. So thank you for sharing that for those who didn't hear it. And again, for those who did not listen to Ground Zero, Lolita goes in, and it's like a 10-minute podcast. So really it's a quick listen. But I really wanted everyone to hear, because a lot of times we hear the term generational trauma, and sometimes that becomes a word that we don't necessarily understand because it's used in so many different contexts. So thank you for going into depth on that. And so Samantha, I'll turn it over to you for maybe one or two more questions in the Q&A before we wrap it up.
Awesome. Love that. Okay. So on your site, Lolita, when talking about your podcast, it says that Lolita G is unapologetic as hell about her fierce advocacy for Black girls. And we have had the opportunity to see a glimpse of that, no doubt, tonight. So incredible, amazing. Thank you. We are all excited. If you haven't, like Dan said, if you haven't already had a chance to check out Ground Zero and the podcast in general and take in more episodes, please continue to do that. And I would just love to hear a little bit more about the podcast and maybe a recent guest that you really loved having the chance to connect with.
Thank you. So I'll point to season 1. We just completed season 2. We're in preparation for season 3, which I'm really excited about. But season 1, I highlight the story of a young Black girl named Erica Hill. She went missing from our community and was missing for 12 years, at which time it found out that she had been killed many years before that. And I highlight this story because when we hear numbers like 65, 75,000 Black women and girls are missing, that's just overwhelming. And I wanted to be able to highlight that story, that scenario, by bringing it down to the story of one Black girl that was missing, Erica Hill. And I talk about, who killed Erica Hill. She was horrifically murdered. It's a very heart-wrenching story. But I think for me, one of the reasons I wanted to highlight Erica's story was because it is the epitome of an undefended Black girl. She was let down by her school, by her church, by her community, by family, friends, neighbors who saw things, who did not respond accordingly, who did not respond quick enough, who did not respond consistently. And because of this young lady lost her life in a very tragic way. And it's important for us to see the brokenness in the system and all the holes that Black girls fall through, like Erica, and that when you can humanize one of those 65,000 girls, you begin to understand that each of those missing Black women and girls has a story. But I also want us as a community to understand that Black girls don't go missing by themselves. They don't go missing in a vacuum. She once was in the classroom. She once was at the family reunion. She once was sitting on the church pew, and now she's not there. Are you asking any questions? Where is she? Until you find out.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. You are such a voice and such an advocate, and we do feel the way, that you help us connect, to the individual and see past kind of just like the norms and the narrative. So thank you for that message. Just looking through the Q&A, I think we probably have time for maybe one more. Dan, do you have anything queued up and ready? I can jump back in and pull something.
No, I'm happy to ask the one last question, and just as a reminder before I ask this question, there's probably 6 or 7 unanswered questions, along with probably the question that everyone's asking or wondering about: how do we support Black girls in our community and how do we move this forward? That will be recorded just for the sake of time. But I do want to come back to your point about cultural competency, Loleta, about can cultural competency be real if it's taught by Black people, or is it an invalid concept altogether? What replaces that if it comes from those individuals? And so just wanted you to elaborate a little bit more because Jessica had asked that question.
No, I really feel that the whole concept of cultural competency was put in place by white people in order to continue to feel comfortable having white people serve communities of color. Because if I now become competent in serving Black people, I don't need to hire a Black person. So I think the concept in itself is messed up. And I think it's detrimental to diversifying workforces. And so I think if you want to be culturally competent in working with Black women, hire a sister to do the work.
Thank you for that. And just for the sake of time, I know we do want to wrap the event up. So I would at this point want to turn it over really briefly to Rebecca Compton-Allen, just to talk through, again, as we kicked off the event, right? Allies educate, donate, and affiliate. And one of the things that Rebecca will talk about is what are those opportunities moving forward, specifically with some of the concepts that we talked about tonight. And I can fill in anything, RCA, that you don't mention as well.
Sure. I am going to focus tonight specifically on the affiliate portion. I had the conversation with Loleta earlier last week about what we can do, what we can bring to the table to support the work that she's doing. And I know a lot of you are probably sitting there thinking, how can I get to know someone as inspiring as Loleta, or how can I support the amazing work that she's doing? My work is primarily in pairing needs with skills. So I'm looking for support in 5 areas. One is personal and project assistance. And this would be a role that would be very close to Loleta, working 5 to 10 hours a week and some personal and project assistance if you have some administrative skills. We're also looking for individuals with skills in the area of marketing or social media, videography and editing, And then also hosting live events like this one. There's a lot that goes into it in terms of communications and support with technology and things of that nature. These opportunities are available to all of you through an application and interview process. And I did have the chance to ask about some characteristics that Loleta was looking for. And she's looking for people who are good communicators with a great sense of humor, a good sense of yourself, and boundaries and discretion. So if that's something that appeals to you, if you want to learn more about any of those things, you can email me at volunteer@nehemiah.org.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Other things that I just wanted to quickly mention for the group, again, specifically to the educate and portion. So I know Don will drop this in as well, but one of our requests is, again, not only to donate to Nehemiah, but also consider donating to the Defending Black Girlhood. And there's a couple different options there. And I would actually offer this challenge. When I looked at your website earlier, Loleta, you are at 89 Patreons or patrons. The goal is 100. So I'm going to put that as a challenge out to the group tonight. Can we get 11 more? Because yes. I know when we do, I know you have it on your website too, and I want to hear this, which is, again, a tipsy episode of A Conversation with an Angry Black Woman, which sounds fantastic. So it's going to be with your favorite girlfriends and a bottle of Cuban rum. So yes. I think it's going to get pretty fun. But again, can we get 11 more people at least to donate? And then again, we are going to ask you actually in the action or ally in action about downloading her podcast, Defending Black Girlhood. But also we're going to send you a link to a video that's about, again, the 7 hopes of a Black woman that Loleta is featured in. It's about a 20-minute video, I think 15 minutes or so of content. It is phenomenal. This will take your leading to the next level, again, outside of this event. So we'll provide that information to you. But again, it's another way to get educated on this type of content. And so we want to make sure that you have those opportunities. And again, just to jump to that ally in action. So again, every event, we want you to take the next step. And I know a lot of individuals have always asked, what is that next book or podcast or movie or documentary? And so we really want to encourage you to download her podcast wherever you get podcasts today. And again, download it, listen to some of the podcasts. If you didn't listen to Ground Zero, start there. You could even listen through season 1, listening to the case that Loleta talked about. And I know there's multiple podcasts about that event, so you can kind of follow through that journey as well. And so before I do any closing remarks, I would just want to ask Loleta or Dr. G, are there any closing remarks that you would like to have for the attendees tonight?
I would just like to say that was a great presentation, and take a risk, lean in, don't worry about trying to fix a situation, but support the work that Loleta is doing. Sometimes people want to jump right to what can I do? How can I help? It's not really about assuaging any of your guilt or feeling absolved, but support the folks who really know how to do the work. One of the best things you can do for Black girls today is to empower someone who finds it difficult to find funding from white women's foundations to fund Black women to do work with Black girls. That's a no-brainer, but yet that happens. So please lean in. This may be the best or the first opportunity that you've had to do something very meaningful that's making a difference in the life of a young Black girl.
Thank you. And I would just like to thank everyone for just coming, because this is uncomfortable. It's not easy, but this is the way, by spending time and talking and sharing and asking questions, this is how we move forward together. And my notification just went off. I just got a new patron. Thank you, whoever that was. Somebody wants to hear me tipsy. Can you imagine me tipsy?
I think it will be phenomenal. I think the filter will be even more removed, which sounds amazing. You might get one as soon as I can also get in there. So give me a second.
And Daniel, depending on the size of the patron gift, they might be able to join her for some of that Cuban rum.
Ooh. It's nothing like Cuban rum.
I want to hear your phone go off again before we're done.
Yes. It just went off again. Hey.
No, that's great. And again, we do want to thank everyone for attending. And one thing that I did forget to mention, it is on the screen, but this is another exciting thing coming from, or it's actually already been held. through Nehemiah and Justified Anger, which is White and Wondering. So this is another incredible space that another ally and multiple allies have come together to create a space for white individuals to talk through the challenges that you're hearing from this. So one of the things that we're going to be working on moving forward is the timing. Sorry about my baby in the background. It's just one of those days. But we are going to be talking about the timing of Lean Into Allyship and White and Wondering so that we can create this space of education and then allow some time for reflection and then come and talk with your white or non-Black would-be allies on how you can start to process some of this, because it might be the first time you're hearing about it. And so we want to make sure too that we don't put that burden on our Black community, family, and friends to talk us through that. So how can we start to create that space and really start to process that? And so that will be on the third Thursday, and we will send all of that information out. Again, that's another virtual event.
I think just a quick add into the intention behind this event. So often during our allyship events, we get questions about specific resources, right? Specific books and documentaries and, places and people and just different ways that allies can continue to tap in and learn and unlearn. And those are questions that we really try to avoid in this conversation, right? We really encourage our, fellow allies in training to dig in and do that work, in the aftermath, right? As the result of these conversations and the speakers that we get to connect with and the work that we're doing in these sessions, to then dig in ourselves and do that work and source like kind of that next level of learning. So we get a lot of questions on that. We don't always have an opportunity or take the time to answer those specifically, but White and Wondering will be a great place to connect and share recommendations and resources. So that alone is a great opportunity to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. So I know we are a little bit over time, but there were a lot more questions that continue to come in, and I see that it's actually increasing still. So what we will do is we will set up a Zoom and record those answers with Leleda, send that out in the follow-up email. So it might be a little bit longer, but from when the normal follow-up email comes out. So you'll hear all of those answers, and because we do want to make sure that you are truly driving these conversations moving forward. And so just as a quick reminder, again, allyship is a verb. It's not a title that we're chasing. This is not a destination. This is a journey that is lifelong, that will continue really to figure out what is that next thing you need to read or listen to. Don't look to us to get that, but just know that that is a journey. And so mark your calendars too for the next couple LIA events, Lean Into Allyship. So the next one is going to be Tuesday, April 27th. And there's a couple different topics that we want to talk about, and it's just going to vary on the speaker availability. And so we're going to talk about health disparities and how that's played out with the COVID vaccines with Dr. Jasmine Zapata. And then we're also going to talk about child welfare systems and their impact on Black families with Judge Reverend Everett Mitchell. And both are incredible speakers. So we're really excited. Again, it's just pending their availability. So look for that, but you can still mark your calendar for April 27th. And again, just a huge thank you to everyone involved in pulling this together. So thank you, Reverend Leleda G, for coming for a third night in a row to talk to audiences. We really appreciate that. But really getting real and raw again on what it's like to be a Black woman in Madison and in our communities. And thank you, Dr. G, again, for your vision, your leadership in the Madison community that you've established through Nehemiah, the center that's coming up, and so many wonderful things that I know are just about to come out too. And so thank you, RCA or Rebecca, for the volunteer activities, Generator for the technology to pull this together. And we actually have AJ or Ashley Keeler helping us as well, making sure that we have this and managing Facebook Live as well. Don dropped things in the chat. So this really takes a community to pull together. And I want to make sure that we take the time at the end of every event to thank you, because this wouldn't be possible without each and every one of you. And so again, there will be a follow-up email that comes out. It will have all of the links. It seemed like the recording may have started a little bit later, but it will be at least 3/4 of the event and all of the chat resources as well. So with that, have a great night, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on the 27th.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll see you in April. Bring a friend.
Awesome. Have a great night, everyone.